I've been covering these stories for 20 years, and this case meant so much to me because it brought national attention to this problem that I haven't been able to get in 20 years, and people are now finally sitting up and paying attention to it. And it's like they're finally believing it because it was too difficult to believe before that this kind of evil existed. Did you hear about Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania? 70 families have come forward against one child abuse doctor who has falsely accused them of child abuse and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. 70 families, Greg. Sally has a lot more victims as well. I've been digging into some of her victims, and I read somewhere in your filings, I don't remember where now because I've just been buried in it, but I read somewhere that she only needs 3 actions against her to lose her license, her medical license. Well, we've got one now with Maya Kowalski. You've got a second one with the Kushners coming. Is there a third one?
I get contacted all the time about doing something. I've had a couple of dads who spent time in jail because of Sally Smith wrongfully accusing them. Just good, hardworking dads that had a dumb thing happen, no intent whatsoever to harm the child. The child was not really significantly harmed, and yet they found themselves fighting for their very lives and their freedom. So yes, there are those out there. The question is getting to them. Now, I'll say this. One of the things that the Kowalskis have committed to, and we will support as well, is they want to start a foundation. Should we prevail, they want to begin a foundation that provides for two things. One is the diagnosis and treatment of CRPS and funding that kind of research. And the second is a defense fund, and to give these families some resources to fight, because it's an unequal battle. You've got the hospital and the state on one side, and you've got average American families on the other. And until something is done to have the equivalent of a high-powered, specialized public defender, I guess, out there to help them, I don't know. I'm not very positive about the system changing. There's too much money to be made and too much benefit to the organizations for this to shut down.
That was something that you didn't really get into during the trial that I was really hoping was going to come out in the Kowalski trial, was how much money is Dr. Sally Smith paid and who pays her? And are there contracts between Suncoast and J Hatch because it's like she takes kids from parents because she's justifying her own existence. She's justifying her job. She's contracted to do exactly what she did to the Kowalskis and to other families. And I don't see how monetizing taking children away from families is any kind of recipe for good things to happen. You monetize something, you're going to get more of it. Yeah? Did you find out anything there about what is the money trail?
Well, okay, so there are, and I don't know how many, I can just tell you in our case alone, there are 3 different subcontractors to the Department of Children and Family, and that do various tasks. Everything from finding ways or where to put kids, to shelter them, to monitoring the children while they're there, to identifying potential victims of child abuse. So you've got all of those folks who are making a buck, and then they tend to be, for instance, in Sally Smith's case, Suncoast, one of them that was a defendant and sued for a while. They were just merely a pass-through, in my view, for Sally Smith's contracting with the state. So Sally Smith was not contracting directly with the state of Florida. She was contracted through Suncoast to be the medical investigator for the child protection team which is part of, again, a contract basis, I think the DCF, the State Department. The fact is, though, that at least in Dr. Smith's case, she also has a private practice, a pediatric practice, and then what I could never figure out, Megan, and although Johns Hopkins is a 501c3 and we kept running into roadblocks trying to figure out how Sally Smith got compensated by Johns Hopkins for bringing these kids in as sort of a feeder system. You saw at trial that Johns Hopkins billed $650,000 after $539,000 was for, quote, treating CRPS, which they did not do. So for Johns Hopkins, that's a sizable chunk of change to motivate somebody to keep a child for 97 days and basically just have to sit there. So the question is, where's the quid pro quo? Now, we uncovered an honorarium, we uncovered some basic things, but we never could quite figure out why there was such a rabid pursuit of putting kids in this situation. And I think if you were to go and look at the contracts, I believe that it is based on a per capita. But again, don't quote me on that. I don't think it's just you're hired to do this job, and no matter how many or how few. I think there's some incentivization there.
Well, I do know that it's a federal law that there's money attached to each child taken that releases federal funds. And that state organizations go after those federal funds like their lives depend on it. And that's from the 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act, which I think was one of the worst things to have happened to the child protection system.